Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our audio webinar on what you need to know before hiring a contractor. Well, this program is being sponsored by the North Coast Builders Exchange. We're a contractors association with nearly 1,200 members in Sonoma Lake, Mendocino, and Napa counties. I'm Keith Woods. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Builders Exchange. I'll be your moderator tonight. Our goal's a simple one. We just want those of you who lost homes in the wildfires that devastated our North Bay now nearly 10 weeks ago. We just want you to be better prepared for when you meet with contractors to plan your rebuilding. I can promise you that neither me nor the three experts we've assembled here tonight to take part in the webinar, we're not going to try and sell you anything. You can choose whatever contractor, architect, supplier, anything, anybody else you want. We're just here to make you better informed and prepared for when you do get your building project ready to go. Two quick points before we get started. We're not able to take questions tonight, but we are going to ask you to send in your questions. We encourage you to submit them by email to, write this down if you can, info@ncbeonline.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, at ncbeonline.com. Although there's going to be a part 2 of this webinar series, and it's on Wednesday, January 10th at 6 p.m. We'll answer at that time whatever the most frequently asked questions that are emailed to us. We'll use that as the basis for part 2 of this What You Need to Know Before Hiring a Contractor webinar series. We'll remind you of this a little bit later, but you'll be able to send in your questions. The second thing I want to note is these 10 tips that we're going to be offering with our experts. They'll be offered later at around 7:30 to 8 o'clock on the Builders Exchange website, which is ncbeonline.com. ncbeonline.com, and again sometime around 7:30 or 8. By the way, we're going to keep this conversational and informal. No long speeches. Nobody wants to hear that. We just want to be able to get to the point and do you some good. Let me introduce our panel of experts and get started. With us tonight, two of the leading contractors in the North Bay. That's Mike Beeler. He's general manager of Beeler Construction Company in Santa Rosa. He's been in construction for 35 years and definitely knows his stuff. He's accompanied by Craig Lawson, president of CAL Custom Building Services, Inc., also headquartered in Santa Rosa. And Craig's been involved in the building industry, construction for 41 years. They're both members of the Builders Exchange board of directors and are very highly regarded. We're also pleased to have with us Eric Steffens. He is an investigator for the Contractor State License Board and is part of their Northern Statewide Investigative Fraud Team. And we're going to open with Eric, as a matter of fact, when we give our first tip. But Eric, for those who don't know what the Contractor State License Board is and what it does, can you give a quick summary?
Sure. The Contractor State License Board is the regulatory agency that regulates licensed contractors. And we also have an enforcement component that also looks for unlicensed contractors, and that's the statewide investigative fraud team. We do stings and sweeps over the proactive wing of the Contractors State Licensing Board. Essentially, the board is a regulatory body with the state of California that licenses contractors and enforces construction law.
Eric, let me jump to the first tip. We've got 10 tips we're going to be sharing with people tonight. And as I may have said, this will be available. We're recording it, and it'll be available later. But let me start in with the 10 tips, and the first one's really directed at you, and I'll ask Mike and Craig to jump in. Tip number 1 to all of you out there who are looking to rebuild. 1, you should use every means possible on your own to find a qualified contractor that you feel comfortable with. You ought to talk to family, and I'm sure you are. This is somewhat obvious, but you need to talk with family and friends, neighbors. If you know somebody in the construction industry or trade organizations for suggestions, please do so. Watch for ads in local publications or local media, as well as social media. But as Eric will explain further, be sure they're appropriately licensed. If you want to verify that a contractor is licensed, you can visit Eric's organization at cslb.ca.gov, or you can email the North Coast Builders Exchange at planroom@ncbeonline.com. We'll have both of those email addresses listed for you. So if you miss them, you'll be able to get them at the end of this. Eric, it's that serious a problem if they get involved in unlicensed contractors, isn't it?
It is. All of our licensed contractors take tests, pass that test. They're all required to be bonded and background checked and their experience verified. And once that's done, they're issued a license, and they're also issued a pocket card with that license. All their advertisement is required to have that license. It's a California state license. It's not any other. We don't recognize any other state license to be contracting here in California. So it is very important, and folks can get on the CSLB website or the Contractor North Coast Builders Exchange website and input that license number and be able to find out everything they want to know, well, with respect to their license about that contractor.
Yeah. What are the consequences for the unlicensed contractor that aren't doing what they should do, and what are the risks for the homeowner?
Well, contracting without a license in California is a misdemeanor. I mean, it's it's a 6 month. It could be 6 months in jail up to a $5,000 fine. If they're contracting in a declared disaster area, that could be a felony. Also, it could be civil penalties up to $15,000. So contracting without a license is very serious, and it becomes even more serious in a declared disaster area.
And Eric, virtually every one of the devastated areas up here has been declared a disaster area.
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, so what typically happens? They're qualified handymen that do great work. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But what sometimes happens if you start with a small project? Does it grow?
Well, a handyman can do small projects under $500, which would include time, material, or the overall value of the project, and it doesn't matter who buys the material. So under $500, a handyman can do small projects. Anything over that, the project would require a licensed contractor. But one of the challenges or risks, it's a significant risk, is not having a properly licensed contractor do work could financially, be devastating to the property owner, along with possibly destroying the home or limiting or hindering the building, the rebuilding process.
If they don't know what they're doing.
If they don't know what they're doing, it's very significant.
Then it's clear that people have already suffered enough with the loss of homes and their properties, so they don't want to add this problem onto it.
No, we see a lot of times in a declared disaster, a terrible tragedy like this, people come in, they exploit somebody's, people or victims are overwhelmed. They've just went through the worst part of anything in their life, probably losing their home. They're completely displaced, and all they really want is their life back. So unlicensed contractors or improperly licensed contractors will come in, they'll play on that desperation and offer the world to them. And once they get involved with somebody that has nefarious, intentions, it really could delay their rebuilding. It could completely, bankrupt them financially.
So literally, if something looks too good to be true,
it probably is.
Good advice. Mike and Craig, part of the tip, besides find a contractor on your own, make sure they're licensed, is look everywhere you can. There is a shortage with a disaster of this magnitude. We're faced with a shortage of qualified licensed contractors, right, Craig?
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that the good qualified licensed contractors aren't out there. It's a matter of finding them, and then when you do find them, go to the CSLB website, and you can access that contractor's particular site, and you can find out if his license is active,
Right.
or inactive, or been suspended, and if it's been suspended, for what reason. So the consumers need to do their homework and,
You know-
and
you
do
know,
background checks.
Craig, it's a good point because we had somebody call in and say, well, the guy's got his license number on the truck, but something feels funny. Well, we looked into it at the Builder Exchange with using Eric's organization, and he had a license number still on the truck, but it was inactive. He had judgments against him. He just still was using that number. So it's not enough just to see the number. You need to verify it.
Absolutely.
You know, Mike, part of this shortage of contractors I mentioned, will some people end up needing to use the services of people who are not in the 4-county area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're anticipating that, we were all the local contractors were already busy prior to this event. So we're going to be relying on, out of town contractors that are going to come in, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as they're properly licensed and they're capable of doing the work that you're asking them to do.
Yeah, nobody should make any mistake about it. We believe in buying local. And we want to use all the qualified contractors in our 4-county North Bay area, but we're going to need help from elsewhere. Separate issue, we're not sure if they've got enough workers and where we might put them up, but at least there'll be somebody to oversee a project. Fair to say?
Yes.
Good. Let me go on to tip number 2. So if you've got, again, you'll be able to find on the Builders Exchange website of the list of these tips. So just spend your time listening, and you can get the list later. Tip number 2, to attract interest from a broader array of contractors, hopefully local, but from outside as well. Try to bundle your rebuilding project with other rebuilding projects in your neighborhood. Many contractors will want to build multiple homes in an area at the same time for maximum efficiency for them, but also what could result in reduction in construction costs for you. By the way, if bundling isn't possible, be sure to ask any contractors you talk to if they are willing to build your home as a standalone project. There will be contractors out there, I assume, that we will be willing to do that, but homeowners have a better chance if there's a bundle of homes. Mike?
Yeah, I noted that I believe it'll be a win-win for the contractors and the owners, and part of the reason is there's just an economy of scale for materials and job overhead costs like supervision and the job trailer and the toilet and all of those things that are associated with running the various projects. And I think for the contractor side, if you have a qualified superintendent who's capable of handling 3 homes at one time, if you can bundle that kind of arrangement and put them out there to oversee it, I think it could be a win-win for both sides.
Craig, comment?
Yeah, and also the bundling will also allow the efficiencies before you actually put the first shovel in the ground. If you can bundle the architecture and all the engineering to go through the plan check process, and then you can bundle that same group to go out and solicit quotes from qualified licensed contractors, then the economies of scale to the vendors, subcontractors, pricing to the general contractor, they'll be able to pass those savings on. The subcontractor knows he's going to do 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever the bundle is. He knows he's dispatching his workers to go work in one area. He's not having to play hopscotch and send them all over the place.
Right.
And so he has some economies built into his pricing as well. And that savings then can get passed along to the consumer in efficiency. You have one plumber on the site working on a group of houses, one electrician, one sheet middleman, one HVAC contractor, et cetera. Okay. And those efficiencies will be realized by both the contractor and the homeowners.
Okay, I don't want somebody to click us off right now if they don't have a capabilities of bundling. Might there still be contractors out there who would take on one home project, whether it's in Fountain Grove, over Napa, or up north? Is that still possible, or should somebody say, I'm doomed?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of contractors that have varying abilities. So, a contractor might take on a large home up on the hill, or maybe a single home in Coffee Park. And I think it's also important to note that in certain areas like Coffee Park, I could see, 50 to 100 homes getting bundled together by a single builder. And I think that when you get up into areas maybe with larger homes, just bundling 3 or 4 could be a good little package for both the
Yeah,
owners.
does it need to be on the same block? Is that mandatory or just helpful? Greg?
It certainly is helpful, but you're going to see the efficiencies. If a superintendent is able to walk the jobs, where he can see the jobs from his job shack and his plans are in close reach, he's going to be a lot more efficient. If he has to turn around and hop in his pickup truck and drive to each one of the job sites, he's going to lose the efficiency. So that if a subcontractor has a question and he's not in close proximity, there's going to be a frustration level. So the bundling certainly does aid there.
Eric?
I just wanted to add that even subcontractors have to be properly licensed, as we explained earlier. I just wanted to add that, a properly licensed contractor will first of all know that they're required to use licensed subcontractors, and most of the time will have subcontractors, specialty contractors like electricians and plumbers and stuff that they have been working with for a long period of time.
Yeah. But is that the homeowner's responsibility to be checking out the subcontractors, or do they rely on the general contractor to do that?
Well, it's both. They need to, the licensed contractor, the prime contractor is required by law to use only licensed subcontractors. That's the first thing. But alternatively, or in addition to that, the homeowner should feel very comfortable asking their contractor, who are the subs on the job, and do you have a list of their contractor's license number? A good contractor is going to be transparent and provide that information to the homeowner. They're not going to want to push the homeowner away and hide stuff from them. A good contractor is proud of the work that they're doing, and they welcome input from the homeowner.
And Mike and Craig, if somebody does meet with a contractor, could a contractor help bundle if they've got other jobs in the area, or is that up to the homeowner exclusively?
I think they could work together, but I mean, the people I've talked to, a homeowner, I've said, hey, you should talk to your neighbors. I just think that's a good place to start and see if there's neighbors that are willing to bundle with you and hire a contractor or hire an architect and work together just to reduce costs.
So the tip is try to bundle. It'll help you find good quality contractors. It'll hold costs down. But if you can't, don't feel it's the end of the road. You still can find somebody that'll build your home. Tip number 3, this is real simple. Do your homework. You've heard it come up several times in our discussions here. Before you meet with a contractor, during a meeting, whether it's a large bundled contractor that's you're a part of, you have a right to do your homework and find out about their experience and their qualifications. Most, I hope it's fair to say, most legitimate and licensed contractors do have a website. Not necessarily all, but it's got to give you a little twitch if they don't have a website. But check that out. Ask for references, particularly past clients, and contact those references. Mike, Craig, who wants to tackle that one and supplement it?
I think we'll just kind of work back and forth. There's just so many things to look at when trying to make sure that your contractor's qualified. How long have they been in business? And we already talked about if they're local or coming into the area to fill a void.
Do they have headquarters, local headquarters? And if they don't, where are their headquarters based? How far are they traveling from? Can the contractor show you a portfolio of the previously completed work and kind of projects they've done and their size?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that they ask about having a headquarters, and some of these tips you can find on Contractor License Board website or the California Department of Insurance. They both have links to hiring a contractor. But, they say just be aware of a guy that pulls up in his pickup truck and he doesn't have a local office, because at the end of the day, you want somebody that's going to stand behind their work.
It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's not able, if they're from out of the area, if they're Modesto, Vallejo, San Jose, doesn't mean they can't do an effective job, but you need to, as a homeowner, be a little more cautious and careful.
Yeah.
Sure. So you should get a list of referrals from them and then give a list of projects they've done, the names of the clients, the phone numbers. Pick up the phone and call those people. Find out, were they satisfied? Were they on time? How was the project handled? those are absolute key things if you don't know who the contractor is and it doesn't have, and he's not local and has a reputation.
Yeah, Craig, Mike, and Erica, I would think if I'm impatient, wanting to get it started, I might relax my standards a little bit, and that's a dangerous thing to do, I would assume. If I just want somebody that says they're ready to go, it'd be easy to look the other way to get it underway, but there'll be a heavy price that could be paid for that.
Yeah, I've heard from homeowners, I want to be first on somebody's list, and that I say, well, you might be first on their list, but if things don't work out, you're going to be the last on somebody else's list. So you
Yeah.
really need to do your homework. And a couple more items. I'm going to skip to the last one I had. When we do a project, we have a lot of repeat business, and we really like the owners we're working with. And so I say, hey, when you meet them, do you like these people? Or you're going to be working with them and talking to them on a daily basis. Is that a process you're going to enjoy, or is it going to be dreadful because they're a stick in the mud? I mean, really, personality is important.
Yeah, but Eric, what else would be included in doing their homework? What if they go and find Woods Construction? Well, that isn't going to happen. But if you found ABC Construction and you went to your site, is there homework there that will help people?
Oh, sure. The Contractor State License Board website is very, very user friendly. It provides a ton of information to consumers, all kinds. If you want to know about unlicensed contractors, things that are required to be in the contract, what to do if something were to go wrong, what are some of the remedies. We have a search function on our site. It can put practically anything in there, and it's going to search the site. And we have tons. We make the site very easy for consumers to navigate. We understand that they may not be experts in the construction industry, but they want to get some more information, so we provide that.
I've been citing to people I've met with this terrible story I heard at the Assistance Center down in the Press Democrat building. Woman was so excited that she said, well, you're here to help me find a contractor. I don't need to worry. I had a guy that stopped by, and he said, I'm going to be first for debris removal. I'm going to be first on the block to get my home built. And I said, how much did this first cost you? And she said, only $25,000 up front, and that moved me to the head of the line. Bells and whistles went off for me. Is that justifiable that I got a little frightened for her?
I would say so.
It was awful.
Something else that Mike brought up was to make sure that not only you get along with your contractor and that you have personality mesh, but add to that communication skills. Is this somebody that communicates well electronically? Do they answer their voicemails? Do they return them timely?
That's a good point.
Do they have a staff that can communicate with you if the contractor's not reached because he's unavailable at that time?
Any further comments on this, Mike?
Yeah, I think Eric should respond to the $25,000 deposit while we're on it, because we don't want to overlook that.
Well, that's
a big deal.
yeah.
Good
Contractor by law cannot charge more than 10% up to $1,000 as a deposit. 10% of the contract price up to $1,000. Anything beyond that is actually a crime. It's a misdemeanor crime. So they can't charge an excessive deposit. And more importantly, they cannot, once you execute a contract, they can't fold in this, like the first payment due the first day they ink the contract to some ungodly amount. So the excessive deposit cannot be overt and blatant where it's clearly over $1,000, and it can't be somehow buried in the contract either. We look for those kind of schemes.
Let me give you a reminder to our listeners. Again, we can't take questions from you at the moment during the webinar, but we do encourage you submit your questions by email to info, I-N-F-O, at ncbeonline.com. info@ncbeonline.com. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a part 2 to our webinar, and that's going to be on Wednesday, January 10th at 6 p.m. We'll be sending out announcements of this to everyone. At that time, we'll answer the questions that were most frequently asked of you. So there will be a follow-up to all of this. So we've talked about the need to check anywhere you can for a good qualified contractor, make sure they're licensed. Tip 2, try to bundle your housing projects. You probably get a better chance of getting built early. 3, we just said, do your homework. Tip number 4, this is going to be difficult for you to accept, but don't expect that contractors will be able to give you precise costs of rebuilding your home. There are just too many variables, too many unknowns for contractors in the complex, complicated building world. And the best you can hope for is probably to get reasonable estimates. And I'll let the pros here respond to that in a moment. I just suggest you ask a contractor to explain what are the variables and unknowns that are preventing them from giving a precise cost, and you'll get a better understanding of the difficulties they face in pricing your project. Mike or Craig, can you address this?
Sure.
Why can't you tell them what's going to cost? What's wrong with you?
Well, we'd love to be able to tell them what it's going to cost once we know what we're building.
Oh.
And because in every situation, everybody's plans have to be updated to current code, we don't know what that's going to be until it has actually been implemented in on the plans. And there's a huge list of items. I won't go over all of them, but just to kind of gloss over a few. So it's structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, Title 24, fire sprinklers, CalGreen, and many, many, many others. And all of those code updates have to be implemented on the updated plans before the plan is even ready to be submitted for a building permit. And a contractor has a plan that he can then take to subcontractors for pricing.
Mike?
Too many unknowns.
And in addition to that, the specifications as well. So what are the tops going to be in the kitchen, and what is the hardware for the doors and all that stuff. So we're going to need a complete set of plans and specifications to be able to send that package out for subcontractor and material pricing. And I think we agree that, you know, if you really want a rough guess on what it's going to be, we can give you something as kind of a multiplier added to past work that we've done, but we won't have exact numbers until we can get the complete plans and specifications.
That's probably difficult in homes that before the fire. So people want to know what's it going to cost me, but until you dive into it, it would be very difficult. In the situation we're faced with, that there are layers of unknowns out there, starting with what, after the debris removal, what are they left with there? Craig, are there other things that'll factor into the cost based on the debris removal?
Absolutely. A lot of the FEMA or Army Corps contractors, when they're done, they've not only removed the foundation, but they've also removed soil from the lot, and they've lowered the grade or the pad height of what the lot was. In order to rebuild your house, that needs to be brought back into compliance with what was originally approved. It's either that, or you'll need to bring in other engineers, soils, survey, civil engineers, to create a new pad at a new approved
Which
height,
adds to the cost.
which adds to the cost, and then that needs to be, plans need to be drawn, submitted to the city, and approved prior to you being able to start. So we have to get the site rebuilt
Right.
concurrently with the plans being brought up to date and the specifications that Mike brought, which add to the unknowns of why can't you tell me what it costs?
You know, I hadn't thought about this, and so I didn't forewarn you about asking about it, but would labor costs and materials cost factor, are those unknowns at this point? Maybe you mentioned it and I didn't hear it, but are there going to be building materials available, and as the cost skyrocketed based on what you've seen?
Well, and that's part of the problem. I think if you said, hey, how before the fire, if you said, how much would it cost to rebuild my house, I'd probably have a pretty good idea, because it'd be pretty close to what we have previously done. But at this point, we don't know exactly what the labor shortage is going to do to the cost for the labor and for material, what the material needs are. And I had heard even recently that copper had gone up 20% in September because of the hurricanes.
Wow.
And there's been issues with the beetles supposedly up in Canada as far as lumber supply. So all these things are going to factor into what the new cost is going to be. And we're just not going to know until we can get some hard numbers from suppliers.
This is kind of inside baseball stuff, but I heard that contractors they've got so much work and there'll be more ahead that they're starting to poach from each other to find workers because it's that much of a shortage. Is that fair to say?
We've heard that.
Not you.
Yeah, not us, of course.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, and
Which drives the cost up because they're
Correct.
paying more.
right. And I think it's not just the actual workers. It's going to be the superintendents and the people that are supervising the work. I mean, to find that quality individual is going to be hard to come by,
And that'll carry-
that's why the bundling for me is if I can do a higher volume with one guy, it makes a lot more sense. So.
And that'll also carry forth in with your administrative staff too. You know, we're dealing with insurance companies where we're more accustomed to dealing with lenders or clients. So the disbursements of the funds is going to be challenging. Insurance companies are holding onto that, onto
Sure.
those funds really tight. And so you're going to have some really experienced accounting administrative staff to help you. And let's hope nobody poaches any of our good staff, because they're going to be working diligently to try and help assist in getting these houses rebuilt so that we can pay our vendors on time and keep our vendors on the job.
You're looking at me like you're sorry I brought that up, so maybe we can edit this out later.
Yeah,
but I hear it so
Yeah.
often
Yeah.
that I saw the National Association of Home Builders, a survey of their members said for every 5 construction workers that exist who are retiring, only 1 new person is going into it. So this is a nationwide problem that we're going to have to address locally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think on the paperwork end, if you look at a subdivision when it was originally built, you had one developer and, you know, he had a funding source, and now he's going to be billing, if he's doing 50 homes, he's probably billing 50 different insurance companies, and some of those might have additional lenders. I mean, the paperwork associated with rebuilding a neighborhood is going to be just 50-fold.
It'd be the safest comment in the world to say it's going to cost more to build this home than the home they were in, what it cost to build it then.
Absolutely.
And I've heard numbers of, well, it used to be 150 to 200 a square foot for cost, and I hear numbers from 250 to $300, $400, $500, and $600. So that's the range we're dealing with. It's impossible to be precise then at this point.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, it's going to be a hard thing for homeowners to accept, and I don't blame them. Tip number 5, you touched upon it, Craig, but I want to go into it a little bit more. Since the pre-construction, the tip is, since pre-construction work that needs to be done, it is very complex, there are 2 good options for getting your home rebuilt as quickly as possible. 1, hire a qualified architect to coordinate what's called the pre-construction work, or find a contractor who can coordinate this work. And some of the pre-construction work, Craig, go over it again just briefly. What's involved in all of this? Because as a layman, it looks like you clear the lot, you put a foundation on and build. So it's not quite that simple, is it?
No, it's not. You're talking about architects and an engineering group that includes civil engineers, soils engineers, structural engineers, fire sprinkler engineers, interior designers, site surveying.
Now you're scaring people, but you're right. All of that's involved in it. And does the homeowner have to do that, or is that where they find a good architect or a good contractor and they'll handle it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, there is a category when you pull a permit as owner builder, but it would, in my mind,
What, somebody doing their own?
correct. But with the process that's going to be required from the city and the county, it's very daunting, as I sent out to my group of people. Because in addition to what Craig mentioned, there's Title 24 and Cal Green. You could need encroachment permits, homeowner approval for if you're in a homeowners association. So there's just a substantial amount of pre-construction stuff that needs to be dealt with. And if your package is not complete when you go in for the permit, they're just going to kick it back.
Yeah, Eric, can somebody be, I don't advise it, and I don't think you guys would, but can somebody try and be their own general contractor? Do they need a license?
They can. There is an owner builder exemption. It's greatly misunderstood because it's very complex. It was written into law around 1939, and now things have substantially changed.
Wow.
So a homeowner can act as their own general contractor in that they are then hiring properly licensed subcontractors to do the work. That's one thing. Or they can hire employees, bona fide employees, to do the work that would otherwise require a contractor's license. An owner builder can certainly do that. But like it's been discussed, that can be extremely complex, certainly within the law, extremely complex to do when you're trying to hire licensed subcontractors. You're actually managing employees. You're having to go through all the regulatory processes. So the one thing I would just caution, owner builder projects, because they're very complex, most owner builders don't have the capability. I'm not saying they can't, but it's a very complex process, and that a lot of ordinary folks aren't unfamiliar with the construction industry may find extremely difficult.
And I have a couple more things to add with that is there's also a layer of insurances that you get from a general contractor who has his general liability and workers' comp, and that's in addition to what the subcontractors are providing. So there's a lot of liability that an owner will take on if they try to do it as an owner builder. The other thing I really believe is that as a general contractor, I believe we get better pricing from the subcontractors. I mean, a tile guy that's worked for us for 10 years will probably give me a better price than the homeowner. So I actually think that, a lot of the costs that go into building the home would be less with a general contractor, which would help offset some of the expenses that are related to it.
Craig?
The other thing I would add to that too is that there's also the benefit of institutional knowledge and expertise. Okay, we're not novices. We've been around this block a few times, and so we have relationships with most of the consultants and with the municipalities. We know what the rules are. We can maneuver the maze down at City Hall a little more efficiently than a homeowner who's walking in, looking like a deer in the headlights. Whichever route the consumer takes, whether they hire an architect to do the pre-construction services or they hire a general contractor, they should ask for a pre-construction written agreement that clearly stipulates all the services that are provided, so they know what it is they're paying for.
Yeah, I'm officially worried now that somebody out there, if they can't find a contractor, they're going to sit down over a table some night and say, you know what, why don't we take it on ourselves? I guess our advice is don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of that is depending on what their insurance limits and stuff were. If as a contractor, if my house had burnt down and I had the sufficient amount of insurance, I would prefer just to hire somebody to have it done. Why do I want to go through the headaches of build? And I'm a contractor, so why would I want to do that when I could just hire Craig to build my house? I just think that makes a lot of sense. I know.
Craig or somebody.
Craig or somebody.
Yeah, and probably
Somebody
Craig.
that resembles him.
Thank you. Tip number 6. That was, again, last tip. Understand the pre-construction work is very complex and hire somebody who knows what they're doing. Tip number 6. This isn't an insurance seminar, but the tip is make sure you have a full understanding of your home insurance policy, and which I suspect you do. This isn't new to you, but you need to be prepared and willing to review that policy with a contractor. This will lead to both of you having a clear understanding of exactly what rebuilding the policy allows. If the contractor has previous experience working with insurance companies and or construction lenders, ask them about that. That would be good for you to know if they have that experience, particularly in the disaster we've suffered. Insurance now is topic A for a lot of people. Can you supplement this and why it's important to sit down with the contractor and talk about it?
Sure. First and foremost, the insured needs to know what their coverage is. They need to know whether or not they have adequate coverage with the riders on their policy to actually rebuild their house. And if they don't, they have a decision to make. They're either going to seek additional funding in the form of a construction loan, or they're going to use personal funds to be able to do that. If they can't achieve either one of those, more than likely, they're not going to rebuild. That's one of the first tasks for the homeowners, is to know what their insurance coverage is and to make sure once they have selected a general contractor that they can rebuild the house for what the cost is going to be.
Do most contractors have experience with this?
I would say it may be 50-50. I mean, a lot of people are just building new construction.
Oh,
and I think when you start doing, insurance work or work with certain lenders, the pay requests become a lot more complicated, and the lien release process, and it's definitely a little more paper pushing, as I call it. And so you really have to be experienced with that to, to get through the process with as least pain as possible.
Or if a contractor said, no, I don't really want to see your policy, or if a homeowner says, frankly, that's between me and my insurance carrier, is this a mistake on their part? Should they be willing to sit down and do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it hurts. I don't think that there's a downside to it. And I also think, we're talking about the complications of billing. Some people might settle with their insurance company and have access to the funds individually, and then you're back to the old, hey, I'm just building a home, and maybe it's a little bit easier processing payments that way.
I'm going to switch gears ever so slightly. I've just seen in the newspaper that there are 5,000, 6,000 or more destroyed homes, but there were 10, 15,000 damaged homes. Do the same principles apply if somebody's had a smoke damaged or partially damaged home? Is everything we're advising apply to people that didn't lose all their home but have some serious damage to it?
Absolutely. You're going to go through a lot of the same permitting activities. House plans are going to have to get brought up to current codes. So they're going to be working with the architects and the engineers. There needs to be an evaluation of what the work scope is going to consist of. If it's a smoke job, what are we doing? Are we only doing cleaning, or are we actually removing interior components to get rid of the smoke that has been impregnated in the drywall, the flooring materials, the cabinets, and anything else?
So is a general contractor required for that sort of damage repair? It's not just brand new construction. Eric, you're nodding your head,
Oh, yeah.
as everyone can see.
Whether it be a damaged or a complete rebuild or anything in between, it requires a contractor, a licensed contractor for anything over $500.
Wow.
You've got to have a licensed contractor. But more importantly, there has to be a contract executed prior to the work beginning. And that contract, a detailed contract executing or explaining the full scope of what the project is. And the contract, there's a number of required things that have to
Let me
be
stop you for a moment. We're going to get into that in just a moment. But I'm just trying to assess that they're different, the total rebuild versus damage repair, but the concepts are still the same.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe just smaller dollar amounts. But
Craig, this puts even greater pressure on the number of contractors and people able to do work if you add in all that. I hadn't even thought of this, but it doubles or more the problem we face. Thank you for that. Tip number 7. It may seem obvious, Captain Obvious here, but shouldn't the tip is make sure everything that you as a homeowner wanting to rebuild or now damage repair, make sure you and the contractor discuss and agree upon everything and put it in writing. No verbal, I'll get to you and back to you on this, Eric, but no verbal agreements aren't going to cut it. And the tip also includes have an attorney review any documents before you sign them. I don't know who wants to start on this one, Eric?
Well, a contract.
You were touching on that.
Yeah, every licensed contractor is required to execute a contract under the construction law, Business and Professions Code 7159 is very comprehensive with all the things that are required to be in there. So licensed contractors are required to do that. Consumers can certainly go onto our website and type in home improvement contract, and we have a tremendous number of things that they can look at.
Okay, say that again and give how they find this information.
www.cslb.ca.gov is our website. They can go into the search function, put in home improvement contracts, and they'll come up a bounty of information required to what's required in the contract. But the consumer needs to understand a well-written, well-thought-out, and comprehensive contract is really what's going to protect them. And it's understood upon all parties, the contractor and the consumer, exactly what's going to happen. There's no ambiguity in that, and they know exactly what's going to happen.
Mike, Craig, supplement?
I wanted to bring something up with Eric. I understand the need for using a home improvement contract, but in many cases, excuse me, foundations have been 100% removed, and it doesn't fall our understanding under the class of a home improvement contract. We're not improving anything, we're starting from scratch. So it becomes a new construction contract. Both of them have
Right.
statutory language.
Right.
The right should be used. So Keith, in the example, you brought up a house that was smoked, that'd be a home improvement contract. In the case where somebody's foundation's removed, that'd be a new construction contract. And the Business and Professions Code does list what the statutory language is on both.
Right. Mike, everything should be in writing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we always try to reference the complete set of plans and specifications, for example, so that there's no misunderstanding that, you know, this is what we're building you, and these are the materials that we're going to be using. So that's just one element to goes into it. But yeah, you don't want anything to be vague, like, you know, where it says we're supplying kitchen cabinets. You want to know exactly what material the kitchen cabinets are out of, and you know, there should be details in the plans, and what are the hardware, what's the finish. I mean, all that stuff should be very specific.
And isn't this designed to protect both sides, the contractor? You want this, don't you? And for the homeowner, it ought to be a must, because there can be nightmares later over this.
Yeah, you don't want the homeowner to say, well, I was expecting such and such chandelier when the plan showed recessed lighting or something. So that's why it's very important to you know, to include the document list within the contract.
Correct.
I would encourage also the homeowners, because I know many contractors will be doing the same thing, is to not permit their house construction to start if all of the specifications haven't been decided on, because we have too many unknowns.
You don't want to start in on something?
Absolutely not. I want to make sure the plans are 100% and all the specifications are done, so we know what we're pricing and everybody knows what's going in the house.
Well, I'd add to that there are times when certain, you know, you haven't picked the slabs for the kitchen counters and you might have a placeholder, but I always tell homeowners and owners in general to spend the money on your construction documents, because if you can get an accurate set of documents, a complete set of documents, and all of the material specifications, so when I put it out to bid, the subcontractors know exactly what they need to provide. They're not guessing. I'm not guessing. You can get harder numbers that people will stand by.
What's a construction document? What are you talking about?
Just as far as the
The
plans and
contract?
specifications, in plans and specifications, meaning that you're going to have a complete set of plans showing all the details for your house, and then you're going to have maybe either some specification sheets or a specification book that outlines everything from plumbing fixtures to light fixtures to paint, the number of coats of paint or whatever it is. It should be all detailed.
And that can be done by one of two people. That can either be done in an AIA type of contract, AIA, American Institute of Architects type, or you could have an interior designer work with you who does the same thing and produce something that's a little more, I call it consumer friendly, easier to read, but it provides the exact same thing that Mike said. As a contractor and a homeowner, you know exactly what's going in all the way down to the hinge colors on your doors.
Part of the tip on making sure everything's in writing, we said have an attorney review it. Are all attorneys capable of doing that, or do you need to find one that specializes in contract law?
If it was me, I would want somebody that specializes in contract law. Just to, I mean, it's a big deal what you're signing. It's a big dollar amount, and there's ramifications for things going wrong. So
Yeah, when I was at the Assistance Center at the Press Democrat, I'd always ask, have you ever built a home before? I'm sorry for your loss. That's the first thing we all said. But I asked, have you ever built a home from scratch? And I'm going to say 1 out of 20 said yes. Everybody else bought or moved into an existing home, and this is all brand new. I wouldn't be surprised if we're not scaring people off here, and we don't mean to do that. They just need to understand, and what we're here for is to make them understand what the process is.
they just need to be informed. And you know, another item as far as contracts is making sure that things are updated. As you go through the process, things are going to change, and change orders can be issued, but all changes should be in writing, and everything that really needs to be in writing so that it's documented and nothing's verbal.
Okay, for those who may not know, explain real quickly a change order. You toss out the phrase, if they've never built a home before, they haven't experienced it.
Let's say they selected oak cabinetry, and then before you started, they wanted to change them to maple and stain them. Okay, so it's a different material, a different finish, and a different cost. So as the contractor, we would secure pricing for them send them what the difference or the delta is in the pricing,
Got it.
and also the description of the material, and ask them to review and approve that prior to us ordering that material. That can be done electronically for starting purposes, so they review and approve the pricing. And then if they say, I want it, then as Mike said, we send them a change order, which formalizes it to tie in with their contracts.
Yeah, I knew all of that. I'm just making sure
And
that
they
the
sign it and the
listeners.
contractor signs it, and then it becomes embodied within the contract.
But I think something that Craig said is important too, is that a change order could be a deductive item. It could be a no-cost item. If you're changing the cabinets,
Oh, I
but you
see.
want to document that the wood was changed, but there was no cost difference, you might still sign something. Or you might have a change order that deals with 20 items. It doesn't have to just deal with one item, but it's good at some point to fall back and document all the changes.
Thank you. That tip, again, make sure everything's in writing, just simply makes sense. Tip number 8, be sure if you're a homeowner wanting to rebuild or even having damage repaired, be sure to ask a contractor, what are your payment requirements? You ought to include in your discussions the issues of an initial deposit. Eric addressed this earlier, but what did you agree on an initial deposit? Well, all of the fees that are going to be attached, you need to understand what your payment requirements are, and a payment schedule that the homeowner is going to be required to follow. Reaching agreement on that up front sure can stave off not only financial and legal problems, but a lot of emotional and stress problems as well. One of you want to address it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, Craig referenced AIA documents, and the AIA documents are several different types, but in there's a section on payment, and there's blanks. And so you have to come to an agreement with an owner on, when are they expecting me to submit a bill? And then when am I expecting to receive payment from you? For most of our projects, we bill at the end of a month, and we typically give them 20 days to provide us payment. In this situation, it's really going to be hard to tell, and some of it it might be dependent on if you're dealing with your insurance company or a lender, what is their payment schedule going to be? Or if you're with a lender, they typically are going to send out somebody to do an inspection to show that our billing is accurate. And so there is a process there, and it's not typically something where I can submit a bill and expect the payment within a couple of days.
Then every contractor might have a different payment schedule. There's nothing that's standard about this, Craig?
Correct, because you could have contractors who are requesting more frequent payments for cash flow purposes and to be able to pay the vendors, to get the vendors incentivized to come to the job. But it has to work in conjunction with what Mike said, with your insurance disbursements. That's a very gray area right now because we have so many different insurance companies and they have so many different payment schedules.
Does the homeowner have a right to say, no, I don't agree with that payment schedule and negotiate it? Or is it a take it or leave it deal?
Oh, I would think that you should be able to negotiate. I mean, as long as you're negotiating in good faith. I mean, what the contractor doesn't want to see is that they're waiting 60 days for payment. I mean, there's some sort of suppliers like to be paid within a certain time frame, which means the subcontractors want to be paid within a certain time frame so they can pay their suppliers to take discounts or whatever it is. So it is to the benefit of the owner to make on time and timely payments.
And Eric, from CS Contractor State License Board viewpoint, what again is their maximum deposit, you said?
Yeah, 10% up to $1,000 deposit, so maximum deposit.
And that's standard then, Craig?
Eric, would you address if there are material deposits required by vendors up front?
Well, I can't really speak to that right now because that is on our. I mean, material deposits would be separate and distinctly different from an actual deposit, contract deposit, and actually you may be able to provide some more information on that, material deposits.
So if you have a vendor who has to acquire materials in advance to secure them.
Use an example.
An example would be somebody wanted to put granite slabs in their house. And so they went out and they went to a warehouse and selected the granite slab. We want to make sure the color matches up with the rest of the items going in the house, the color of the cabinets, the color of the tile backsplash. So the vendor would require a deposit be placed up front to acquire that granite slab. It would be brought into his warehouse. but because the consumer paid for it, the consumer now owns that granite slab.
Right, right.
And so what we tried, when that happens, we talked about this a little bit before, is we try to make sure that that product, wherever it is insured. Once the homeowner pays for it, we want to make sure that it is insured in case, you know, a warehouse has a fire or something, that we have recourse and we can replace that slab.
Is that insurance your responsibility or the homeowner?
No, usually it would be the supplier or wherever the slab's sitting to
Okay.
make sure that it's a secured location.
Or if the general contractor is having the subcontractor purchase the materials, that he provide an additional insured endorsement naming him and the homeowner as
Okay.
additional insured for that protection.
But the important part of the tip is make sure that there is agreement up front on the payment schedules so that there's no fights over that later, right?
Yeah, and one other thing that could be, and we didn't chat about this, but on a lot of jobs there is a retention amount. And so certain contractors, well, what would happen is if I did $10,000 worth of work and the contract requires 5% retention, the owner holds that 5%
Oh, I see.
until the job's done. And so those are open to negotiation too.
Good.
So I'm not sure what we're going to see when we get out there, but
But they need to be prepared for potential.
yeah, on a lot of commercial jobs, it's usually 10%. On residential, it could be 0 or 5% or some lesser amount.
Good, thank you. Tip number 9, we're on the home stretch here, and after we get to 10, I'll quickly review what the 10 were and remind you that to homeowners, those listening, you'll be able to go online and see the 10 tips, and next month we'll answer questions that will again remind you how to submit them. Tip number 9, I'll need help on this. The tip is if you're not aware of the need to have a lien-free project to discuss with a contractor, better learn what that means. Have any contract you meet with explain exactly what their lien and payment process is. You want to simplify this for the layman.
Yeah, I'll skip to the last point. Failing to follow a process could subject the owner to paying twice for the same work. And that's really what it's all about, is a subcontractor. Subcontractors will file preliminary liens on your site, and that's not a bad thing. That's basically just notifying you that the subcontractor is going to be doing work on your site and they're entitled to be paid for their work. As you go through the billing process, the general contractor will submit the lien releases with the billing that shows that the subcontractors requested a certain amount of money. And then he'll follow up with the next payment request, typically with an unconditional lien release, confirming that the subcontractor or the material supplier has been paid. But it's critical to keep that process in mind and to really be checking that paperwork with all the pay requests.
But who carries the ball on that? The contractor, the homeowner, or is it a partnership?
Well, we get, owners that are like shocked when they start getting these things called liens in the mail. But
Oh, yeah.
I tell them, hey, you're going to get 20 of these and you want to see them. But the contractor should be doing this process. You should just be checking it as the billings comes through. You should be
Great.
getting conditional and unconditional lien
They'll
releases.
get preliminary
So-
notices. They'll get notices.
Say it
Yeah.
again, Eric. I'm closer.
The part of the contract is they're going to get preliminary notices as required by the contract license or contract required under the law or pursuant to the contract. They're going to get some of these documents are required for the contractor to provide them.
Yeah, within 20 days of
Exactly.
starting work
Yeah,
on
20
the
days.
project.
Yeah.
So they should expect to get them, but don't be all worried about it and for the preliminary lien notices.
If anything, treat that as part of the homeowner's required homework and documentation. If they receive a bunch of preliminary notices from material suppliers, keep that in a file. And as the general contractor bills you on a line item basis and you get to that particular line item, lumber is an example, then you want to make sure that there's a conditional lien release that comes with the bill that says, conditionally upon you paying this bill, I'm releasing my lien.
Got it.
And then as Mike indicated, in the following month, you should receive an unconditional lien release for the money that has already been paid, so that they have taken it from a conditional to an unconditional status, which then means that it's lien free at that point.
Yeah, and the other thing is the Contractor License Board has great information on this. If you go to their website, they have copies of the actual forms and they have a description and kind of a consumer's guide to liens.
So we're back to making sure you educate yourself. That's part of that you build, but the homeowner needs to educate themselves to know everything that's going on.
Well, I think it's important to ask the contractor about it just to make sure that they're following some process, because there would be nothing worse than not having a process in place. That's where you should get worried. If you have a guy that says, "Oh, I don't deal with the lien process," then you really need to be concerned. That's where you could get burned.
Thank you. We're going to go 5 minutes, 10 minutes more, and then wrap this up with tip number 10. And again, I'll review these in a moment. But I get these questions a lot, so I know the homeowner ought to be interested. There are 3 important questions you should ask in any meeting that you're having initially with a contractor. Again, you might not be able to get firm answers, but you really ought to ask 3 things. Can you give me a general timeline for rebuilding my home? Second, how long is it going to take once you start construction? And third, if we agree on a contract and we sign, when can you get started? Again, can you give me a general timeline for rebuilding? 2, how long will it take once you start? And 3, if we agree on a contract, when can you start? Mike or Craig, can you speak to these? Are they fair questions, almost mandatory ones for a homeowner that wants to rebuild to ask?
Fair and mandatory. But a lot of it's going to be based upon how many people are in their group. How many people have we bundled together? Are we going to build one house, or are we building 2 or 3 or 4? Once the pricing is done, the plans and the permits are done, then the general contractor can go to the consumer and say, okay, we're going to start this group of houses. And let's take a subdivision type of a setting. We're not going to play hopscotch or checkerboard and build lot 1 first and lot 10 second and lot 15 third. We're going to start at one end and we're going to go all the way around, or if it's in a cul-de-sac, we're going to start at the back of the cul-de-sac and build forward. So that gives the sequence of how things are going to move forward. The timing is going to be based upon how many people are in the group and what are the complexities of the house. Simpler houses, the ones down in Coffee Park, 5-6 months kind of stuff. You get up to the houses up in the Fountain Grove and up in the hills, 10 to 12, maybe up to 14 months, depending on the topography and the level.
To get started or complete?
No, for completion.
Okay.
And that would be the construction timeline, not the pre-construction stuff
Correct.
added in. So,
Everybody asks
Thank you.
constantly about how long is it going to take. Like the cost, there really isn't a firm answer you can give, no matter how much they want it.
well, a lot of it's, the construction part might be the easiest to give them an estimate on. It's the pre-construction that's still a little up in the air, because to the checklist that we previously discussed, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. And then we're still not certain how fast things are going to get through the building departments.
And a great many of these things are not in the contractor's control. They're at the mercy of whatever else others need to do. You can't control it. All you can do is estimate it on how long something will take.
Well, for the pre-construction, we can help by guiding and keeping on top of people and making sure that the architect's doing this job, and that, we have certain timelines that are kept. And then obviously once we move into construction, then, we have control over the schedule, better control.
And we can also dovetail on the bundling aspect too. If we are doing the pre-construction services for a client and we're working with similar architects and engineers, we can meet with that group of people and say, okay, we're bringing you a bundle of 4 houses, of houses you've designed or you've done the engineering on, so that we can try and have them prepare a schedule where they're going through that group of housing at one time. Then we can keep that group bundled, so to speak, through the pre-construction process, through the permitting process, and through the bidding process, which then lands us at a starting point where we can start them in very close proximity to one another.
Before I just summarize the tips here and I get some closing comments, what would, if you had a single best tip for what a homeowner can do to accelerate the time it takes to get the key in the front door and they're moving in, is there a summary you could give on what they can best do for themselves? Too tough?
My recommendation would be to select a professional to shepherd them through the pre-construction process. because it's,
That's where a hang it could be.
But if you're gonna bundle, it's gonna be important to get those neighbors figured out, you know, who's gonna be in your group and push forward together.
And then the worst thing to ask for the listeners, be patient in the whole process, because again, the magnitude of this disaster has put pressure on every aspect of the building community, the lending community, the insurance community. This won't be easy, but the question isn't whether somebody can get back into their home. It's only a matter of when and how, right?
And from what I've seen, people are really trying. So it's not like people are slacking, but there's just the magnitude of what's going to be required is just daunting.
Where's the earthquake we were all prepared for? I don't understand. This is, the tragedy gets worse and worse. I can't believe what happened to us. Real quickly, before I issue you my thanks, here we go, the 10 tips. Basically, find any way you can to help find a contractor. Look for any advice and counsel from people you know. Tip number 1, 2, try to bundle homes with others in your neighborhood, preferably on the same block, but at least close by. It's going to be more economical and you'll probably get your home built sooner. Tip number 3, do your homework. Before and after meetings with contractors, look into them. Don't take the first one that drives up the block and sells you a bill of goods. There's going to be a real cost to that. Tip number 4, you can't expect contractors to give you precise costs of rebuilding at the point you're first talking to them. You can pursue it, but you've got to understand the difficulty they're going to have in pricing this. The 5th tip was pre-construction work needs to be done. It's very complex. Make sure that you're guided by and hire a qualified architect to do the pre-construction work, or find a contractor who can coordinate this, because it is complex and comprehensive. Tip 6, make sure you understand your home insurance policy. I know that most of you have done that and reviewed it again, but be prepared to talk with the contractor about your policy. You and the contractor need to have that clear understanding of what your policy will cover and what it allows for. Tip 7, make sure everything is in writing. I don't need to go any further on that. Verbal agreements just then going to cut it, and you and the contractor will regret it. Tip 8, be sure to find out what are the payment requirements, what's the schedule for deposit fees, etc. Tip number 9, make sure that you have a lien-free project and that you discuss this with a contractor. Make sure you understand what that means. And what we just talked about, there are 3 important questions you ought to ask in any meeting with a contractor. Can you give me a general timeline for rebuilding? How long is it going to take once you start? And when we agree on a contract, when can you get started? So those are the 10. I'll remind you right now, again, in just a little while, 10, 15 minutes or so, all 10 of those will be available on the North Coast Builders Exchange website. You're probably looking at it right now. You can, in just a few minutes, you'll see in that black box to the right the opportunity to get the list of 10. You also will have a chance to ask your questions for us to answer next go around by emailing the question, and I hope you'll write this down. Email the questions you might have to info, I-N-F-O, at ncbeonline.com. And again, Wednesday, January 10th, we're going to answer whatever questions popped up most. I can't thank you, Craig and Mike and Eric, enough for taking the time to do this, making it as clear as you possibly can, because it ain't easy. If you haven't gone through this before and building a home, it can be fun a little bit, but it's very difficult and you need to do everything right. So thanks to you. Tom Boylan of the Boylan Point Agency coordinated all this, and Tom, thank you for the great work that you did for us. We hope all of you listeners are better prepared for the rebuilding that lies ahead. As I said, you'll get into your home faster and better if you prepare up front and inform yourself of all that you need to do. 10 tips will be up here in a moment, and a reminder again, January 10th is part 2 of this. By the way, to listen to a recording of tonight's webinar again, or if you know somebody that couldn't listen in but you think they would benefit from it, go to the link on the Builders Exchange homepage and you'll be able to listen to that. Starting what?
tomorrow morning.
Starting tomorrow morning, I'm told you'd be able to listen to it or advise others. Let me say again, I'm Keith Woods from the North Coast Builders Exchange. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely hope you got value out of the time you spent with us, and good night and good luck in your rebuilding.